From central Colorado, the river flows southwest into Utah, Arizona, cutting through the Grand Canyon and then running into Nevada, California, and all the way into Mexico. The mighty Colorado River is a source of water for 40 million people in the American West, and it's more depleted than it's ever been. For the first time ever, a new report by the Federal Bureau of Reclamation declared a water shortage, meaning that by the beginning of next year, Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the country, will fall low enough that some people who are used to depending on the water from the lake won't be able to get it. In fact, Lake Mead, which was first filled in the 1930s, is at an all-time low. The biggest hit will be to farmers.
Some of them may be using groundwater, some of them may be growing different crops, using different irrigation methods. But that's where the real impact in the near term, in this tier 1 environment, will be felt.
Professor Sharon Megdal is the director of the Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. She noted that cities and towns often rely on different water, which comes from the Central Arizona Project. So this latest report won't really affect them. It would take much more time than we have on this podcast to delve into the history of management of the Colorado River, but in some ways, while this report spells out new trouble for the area, it's also been a long time coming. People have been managing use of the river for nearly a century. The water is managed by hundreds of smaller laws, really based on the basic fact that a desert region needs to carefully allocate its resources. So it's not uncommon to think in terms of shortages. Still, a report like this makes the threat of running out of water a little bit more salient.
I think that the impact or the importance of this declaration of shortage means that the shortage conditions are real. Since 2007, we've had these triggers on the books, on the regulations. If Lake Mead went below a certain level, a shortage would be declared. We knew it could happen, but I do think the reality of something actually happening like this will be recognized and thought about by more people. It's real as opposed to something conceptual. People may start asking questions like, what is the drought plan of my city or town that I live in? Water utilities and communities do have drought plans.
That means perhaps building new housing differently or limiting green lawns, which use up a lot of water, maybe reserving them for things like ball fields or spaces around pools where kids play.
The impacts can be on all users in Central Arizona over time, depending upon what cards Mother Nature deals us. And we just don't know, and that's why things will have to be monitored very carefully. And so I think you'll see more and more partnerships, collaborations, innovations to keep the overall river system healthy enough. But unless we have a number of good winters in a row, I think we're looking at a tier 1 shortage at least for a couple of years. And maybe we'll be lucky and have some very good winters, but we have to be prepared if we don't.
That could involve essentially paying some communities not to use all the water allocated to them so that it's available to others. Based in Tucson, Arizona, Brad Poole has been reporting on the Colorado River for years, and for him and his neighbors, the idea of water conservation is nothing new.
There's sort of a cultural effect here that it's a culture of conservation. And I don't feel it as a sense of concern or fear. I feel it's more of a community, a sense of community that we have to sort of all do our part to make sure that we can still have a city here.
I talked to Brad about the group with the most to lose when it comes to this new shortage, farmers in the region.
Arizona has what we call the 5 C's that prop up our state. And it's cattle, cotton, copper, climate, and citrus, oddly. So farming is very, very big in Arizona, as strange as you would think that is. Agriculture is very big here. You may have heard of Pima cotton or seen a symbol in your clothes for Pima cotton. Well, I'm in Pima County, Arizona, so that cotton comes from this desert.
Brad interviewed someone from the Farm Bureau about this shortage, and they described a study saying that the Tier 1 shortage would cause a $66 million loss just on crop sales. On top of that, the study predicted $104 million of broader economic impact because of the surrounding industries that exist because of these crops. While the first effects of water shortage are being felt in agriculture, it's possible that, like Professor Megdal said, other groups will face similar challenges down the road. Looking toward the future, it's expected that there are more tiers to come, and that could have a greater impact on even more communities. Tier 1 and Tier 2 would mean more cuts affecting even more users, including cities, towns, and tribal nations. Remember when I mentioned that some communities could be paid to use less water so it stays in the reservoirs? As Brad has reported, water regulations could give some tribal groups a more substantial stake in Arizona's water.
Tribes will collectively control almost half of that Arizona water. And that's like 40% of the water, 35% of the water in Arizona. So they're going to control a lot of water. And they have agreed in some cases to leave some of that water behind, as they say, in Lake Mead to provide more of a cushion in Lake Mead. So water they're not using, they've left behind for other users in Lake Mead. When the allocation for the state drops 512,000 acre feet next year, about 105,000 of those acre feet, a fifth of that water, will be made up through mitigation from various sources. One of those sources is Native American tribes. So they will lease their water to irrigation districts, which will then sell it to farmers.
Like Professor Megdal said earlier, some of the outcome all depends on what cards Mother Nature deals the region. So it's impossible to talk about the future without also talking about climate change. And it's tricky to attribute any single event to the overall warming of the planet. But at the same time, we also know the signs of climate change are becoming more and more clear.
This area is very sensitive to changes in climate. And so when climate change does have impact, it hits here first. Arizona, Nevada, the dry parts of the Southwest, probably Texas, New Mexico, all of those areas are likely to see impact from climate change before other places, because we kind of exist on a razor's edge here to begin with. And everything here is very dependent on the tiny amount of water we have. So when you take away any part of that, it can have big impact.